Hello, good morning. Welcome back to Reaper Pro-Tips. This is me, your host, Anne, and we also have disembodied Justin and disembodied voice John. All of the disembodied voices and hands. How is everyone today? Sorry, I'm a bit late this morning. I was discombobulated. I totally lost track of time because I was trying to prep stuff for the rest of the day, and then I was like, oh my god, it's way too late. I thought I had all this time. I got up early, but then, you get into it and you're like, suddenly 10 minutes flies by and you're just like, what happened? I want that 10 minutes back. Paint slangers. Is that what we are now? Hello, everyone. Hello. Random assorted visitors, guests, stalkers, and weirdos. That's pretty much our community. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm with, was it Einstein who said time was an illusion? I don't remember. But I'm there. Time is so weird and relative. Well, it's relativity, right? But yeah. I'm sure he didn't mean that, but I'm sure he experienced it. Oh, Garlug, I have tiny curry tree. I have 2 tiny curry trees, but one probably isn't going to make it. It just never quite recovered from shipping. But one is doing very well. And then I've got Thai basil and dill, baby seedlings. We don't get a lot of... There's not morning direct light through this window. We only get afternoon direct light through this window, so it needs a little extra help. But I wanted to try growing some herb seedlings. And this was the open space I had, so I bought a grow light. And so far, the little curry tree seems to love it. The one. Because the other one, after getting shipped in the dark for 4 days, the other one is not happy and probably won't make it, but we'll see. But one of my little curry trees is adorable and doing well. So I need to actually replant in a bigger pot this weekend. Hopefully I won't kill it then. But I like plants. I have 3 orchids in the other room, and we have a big basil and a mint. All right, so let's see. We're going to finish Monique's hair today. We did her black cloth using Drow Nipple Pink, which is the shadow on her skin tone. But now we want to finish the hair. We kind of got, some highlights kind of factored in, kind of brushed in. You can see it there. But we didn't get the final highlights on. So, as I recall... Okay, guys, refresh me here. It looks like... I can't tell if it's Blue Liner or if it's Nightmare. I think it's Blue Liner. Nightmare's so blue. I keep thinking this is really blue, but it's really not that blue. So... Yeah, exactly, Garlic. Well, that's how I got around it, because our balcony is terrible. We tried to have herbs last summer, and it did not work. Not enough light. So that's why I started with the grow lights over here, and everything seems to like them. They're LED bars, and there's 3 of them off of 1 clamp. So I can spread them out or redirect them or whatever. So I have to say that's working, because yeah, right now we have 1 windowsill where we can put the basil and the mint, and even then I think later they aren't going to do so well because there are trees right outside there, and as the leaves get bigger, they block more light to our window. So we're fighting the losing battle on our herbs, but David loves fresh basil, so, and I do too for some things, but he eats caprese sandwiches all the time for lunch, so, because he can eat evil tomatoes and I can't. But yeah, I love herbs, and if we get a place where I have an actual backyard, we will have a nice fresh herb garden. All right, so let's start out with just some of our straight up blue liner. How's it going, dog father? But yeah, our balcony is kind of worthless for plants. I could put a grow light out there, Garlung, I think, but we don't really have the stupid thing about our balconies, we don't really have any plugins. There's nowhere I could plug in grow lights out there, even if I did want to bolster some plants. So we have kind of a rosemary out there that's kind of struggling along and has been for the last, pretty much since David moved in. 2 years. We've got a, what else is out there? Oh boy. Oh yeah, an Italian parsley that still tries to grow because it's weed. It's like a weed. Yeah. Yeah, I like the LED green light. And the nice about the LED grow lights is that since they use a lot less power, right? All right, we're going to set up some highlights here. We want a few different things set up here for hair, for black hair specifically. So we want a dark or black color that we can use for glazing. In this case, I'm going to go and actually add a drop of pure black to my blue liner for glazing to bring things back down, or for if I get my highlight a little bit too wild, too big. Then I've got blue liner and white, just like 4 drops of blue liner, 1 drop of white. I'll mix that up in a second. I'm going to thin that down quite a bit. I'm not going to thin this down as much yet. Then I need some blue liner. I might just take a brush full of that and put it into that. It's usually what I do. Good morning, Inara. Interesting, Dogfather. Yeah, that's cool. I don't know if I'd get that far into it. Because it is a lot of time, and I have so many other things I like to do that I don't know that I could do a full garden. Because I used to watch my grandma do that, and man, it took time. She had a big garden. She spent a lot of the day out working in it. I keep feeling like this isn't quite blue enough. Maybe I'm just doubting myself. So I'm just going to mix these until I've got something that's... There we go. I want to see steps, like a triad type steps, except a quadrad in this case. It is Chibi Day, yeah. We're almost done, though, Chibi. Like, after NMM Gold. I did find my werewolf that I started ages ago, so maybe we'll finish him on stream. He's the only other Chibi. I've got one of the Scale 75 small grinders, too, but she's, like, off in the box of not looking at right now in the closet. So I'm going to thin down my white a lot. This is about... I put 3 drops of water in, and it's 4 drops of paint, so it's almost a 1-to-1, and I'm probably even going to thin it more than that. But we'll see. You want white or near white highlights on hair, but you want them not to be like super strong, like bright spot highlights. Unless you're doing something like super shiny black hair that's like really like skull cap, like really, cut so that it's very flat. Very, very straight hair, cut very close to the head, can get that almost like harsh, like anime type highlight, right? But when you've got hair that moves or that's varied, you can see, the highlights on this side for me are more an off-white, right? And if you got close to them, you'd see that it is actually individual strands of hair picking up the white light. But, from a distance, you're not going to see that necessarily. You see it a lot more out in sunlight. In sunlight, you get your strongest highlights. And you see it in, dang it. Oh, I lost it. You can get really bright highlights on certain colors of hair and certain styles. Like, obviously, blonde tends to go up to white very fast since it's pale hair. Yep, hello, everybody. Hey, Paul John's Life, how's it going? And, yeah. Right, yeah. Oh, that's funny, Shadow Raven. That's good when you've got 2 people who enjoy growing things. David enjoys neglecting things, and I enjoy keeping alive the things that David is neglecting. Actually, the thing is that David really enjoys having plants around the house, but like many of us, he gets busy and forgets, so he purposefully has chosen plants for himself that are very resilient, which is smart, right? Because he really does like having them around. Like, we like having green stuff in our houses. Lettuce, radishes, and peas. Yeah, lettuce. I don't know. Lettuce too much. Too much work, I think. Like, I just buy my lettuce. All right, let me see here. Glasses. I was tempted to do things like bell peppers. But I don't know, like the problem too is also we use so little, right? So I'd have to, what Grandma did always is she ended up canning a bunch of it, right? Remember that old fashioned thing that's coming back into style? It regularly comes back into style. But she would always do, she would turn all our cucumbers into pickles, and she would, do canned tomatoes and all the stuff. So nothing went to waste, and she had it all winter. Because my mom's family was pretty big. Like, there was, I think, 6 or 7 kids. 6, I think. Oh, you killed a cactus? Yeah, you can do that for sure. Any plant is killable. Let's do it. Arya from Game of Thrones, like, any plants can be killed. Driveway gardening. Interesting. Mini cucumbers. Interesting. I wonder if that's how they get tiny pickles. All right, so this is what we got, guys. We've got our blue liner that I've actually added a bit of real pure black to, just because I want to have something to feather in if my highlights get out of control here. We've got kind of a dark bluish color that I can use as a transition. It was the first layer. Typically I lay down on something like this. We've got more of this lighter blue, which is more like what our highest highlight is on the hair right now. And I'm going to want to thin that a lot. That's more like 3 drops of white with a couple of brushfuls of this in it. And this is 4 drops of blue liner with 1 drop of white. Although I did do a little bit of mixing back and forth here. I tend to like mix until I see, like, I can see the steps. Like, you want to make sure that your colors, like this even is a little bit too dark. So you want to make sure your colors are different enough so that you can see the transitions on the model. That's better. Like, you want to see them go up like a step and a half, at least a full step with every differentiation. And if you are new to blending, you could absolutely make more steps. If you make more steps and like did something halfway between here and like maybe halfway between here to give you 6, you'd be in pretty good stead, and even if you didn't blend it perfectly, it would still look fairly blended, especially if you thinned your paint, because you'd be going up in so many steps. So it like takes up more of your palette, and it takes up more time to do that layering. But if you feel like you're not good at blending, it's a good tactic. I mean, it gives you at least, it'll give you a result probably that you like. And then as you learn more and get a better feel for your paint consistency and how you can thin paint to make it transparent, you'll find you won't need as many steps. Yeah, since tomatoes are poisonous to me, I'm like not into them, but I do love pickles. Oh, and I do love, I love pickled vegetables, and especially like the sweet pickled vegetables like Hawaiian and Asian cultures do. I love those things. The cucumbers and radishes and carrots. All right. Yeah, I wish we had more, like, a bigger fridge. I wish we had a big freezer. Gosh, I could go to town. All right, so there we go. There's our colors. I still feel like this is a little strong. If you see your color, if you mix up your color and you see it really clinging to the side of the well, you know it's still really opaque. And if it's opaque, it's not going to be transparent. It's not going to be see-through. So I keep adding water, because if you can still see that it's really solid and it's not see-through at all, it's not going to create this blended effect that we've got going on. Sure, man. I always show everything I can, and I try to explain everything I can, because we have a lot of new people who tune into this show, like people who are like getting back into the hobby after years out and things have changed. And then, you know, people who are brand new to the hobby who just like stumbled into it because it's an awesome creative art form and fun to do, especially with your family, kids, or significant other. So yeah, so I try to explain everything. I try to demystify it. All right, so now we can see the highlights that I put down real quick last time with the color. Kind of started out with something like this, and then I went up to that, and you can see those lighter streaks a lot easier. But it covers a lot of the surface. And remember, when you're trying to paint something black, you want a lot of that surface to stay black, like 75% of it. When you're doing a treatment that goes over the entire surface like this, it can be hard to judge how much am I actually covering on the surface. So... Oh yeah, Mad. Okay, so Mad, let's set you up. For the base coat, depending, are you using bones or are you priming metal figures or plastic figures? If you're using primer, then usually what I tell people to do is like a 4-to-1, 4 drops of paint, 1 drop or brush full of water. I just use an extra empty dropper bottle for the water. If you are doing bones, I do recommend you make it a bit thicker, like a 5 or 6 drops of paint and 1 drop of water. You always do want to add a tiny bit of water. It just makes it a lot smoother of a base coat. If your bones have trouble with paint sticking to them, wash them. I always wash them. I don't even try. Because sometimes it'll stick and sometimes it won't. And when I'm on the stream, it has to like work the first time, or at least, you know, it's best if it does. So I always just throw them into a plastic bowl with some really hot water and a couple drops of dish soap and just swoosh them around with my hand for maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. And then I just rinse them well. And then I let them dry in a cloth overnight or a paper towel. And they're ready. Like the paint sticks really well even when I thin it. So those are like kind of your base coat consistency. So I would say if you went for 5 drops of paint and 1 drop of water for a base coat, you'd be pretty good. Remember that when you worry about wasting paint, as many people do, remember each of these bottles has like 400 drops of paint. You're not wasting paint. 1 drop is is 0.25%. Like you would, okay, I paint every day and I will run through a bottle of pure white in like 3 months. But like that's the exception. Like it's maybe taken me a year to run through a bottle of like rich leather, which I also use all the time. And I paint every day. You probably don't, and probably not for as long as me. So keep it in perspective. A lot of new people are afraid of wasting paint. Get out of that mindset, because to make a well palette work, you have to put a lot of paint in here. The reason my paint puddles are so big and I'm building them so deep is that keeps the paint at the right consistency throughout my painting session. If you only use 1 or 2 drops of paint, then and a drop of water, it's still, even in a little well palette like this, because these are tiny wells, they're like, there's my thumb. My thumb fits in a well. This is a well palette with a lot of tiny wells instead of a few big wells. So, but the thing about a well palette is you've got to fill up those wells at least halfway to really make them work. Because the point is that you want less surface area exposed to the air, and that's what keeps your paint at the right consistency. And if you do it right, if you do it like for me, I do like 4 to 6, usually sometimes 7 or 8 drops of paint in each one of these, and then I'm adding a lot of water. So this paint's going to stay good throughout our stream today. Like I might have to add a little bit of water at like the halfway or 3/4 way point, because I'm in an arid climate, so it dries out pretty fast and it's been warmer lately. But in general, like you could paint for an hour and still have your paint be at the consistency you need it. So when you are new, it is, I think, very beneficial, even if you have a wet palette as well, which I always say buy both and play with both because they are good at different things. But if you're trying to understand paint consistency and how much to thin your paint, it's so valuable to have like a little well palette like this, because you can thin the paint to various consistencies, work with it while it's at that consistency for a fair amount of time, and really start to get a feel for how it acts when it's at 4:1, when it's at 2:1, when it's at 1:1. And different colors are going to act a little bit differently too. Something with a lot of white in it is going to need a lot more thinning to get it to go like to layering. So yeah, totally. So I find many people will hear that you are in a desert climate and say you should get a wet palette. And a wet palette will keep your base coat paint wet for longer. But if you're trying to get the hang of working with thinned paints so that you can work with your wet palette more effectively, try this sucker. And I think we've got our !tools command that actually tells you where to get them. They were back in stock. It's a place called Cheap Joe's. And they're like less than $10. Like if you can catch them on sale, they're dirt cheap. And it's a ceramic palette, which means that it's really, really cleanable. Like I never have problems cleaning it. It always cleans up really well. Unlike a plastic well palette or a metal one, where the paint will inevitably start to just stick to the metal or the plastic and you have to scrub like a demon to get it out. Here, you just run some hot water into it. I spray some Method or 409 into it. And then 5 minutes later, I come back with a green scrubby and it all comes up. So there you go. Quindy has linked in chat the tools section, and it's the first link there, the Cheap Joe's porcelain palette, 28 well. Yeah, what wet palette is good at is thick paint. So like if you use like tube paint, or you use even really thick paint like maybe Vallejo, Scale 75, some of those other brands, your wet palette's going to be great. But I still say the well palette works much better with thinned applications, and it works good with internalizing. Because in order to use, in my mind, like I started getting a lot more out of a wet palette once I really had figured out, like I had a gut understanding of how paint acted at various levels of thinning and at what thinness my paint needed to be for me to get smooth layers, smooth highlights, blending, all the rest of it, right? Textures, whatever. So, but until you have that understanding, it's all just trial and error. And you can get frustrated using a wet palette if you don't have that. So I think that I still feel that the wet palette, when you're working with like thin paint applications where the wet palette just tends to wick the paint, you know, wick the water up or down. Right, crows and bones, exactly. Pendrick, the amount of paint in a bottle is going to vary. Usually it's between 350 and 410 or 360, 410. I don't remember. I only did a couple of colors because sitting there and squeezing out drops of paint is really annoying. You don't have much of a stomach for that. I did 2, I think. And then I was like, all right, we're good. And actually Ed has, since I did that count, Ed has actually mandated a slightly higher fill on our bottles. And so consistently, so it is probably like close to an average 400 now. Oh, cool. Color Theory webinar. Yay. It is a lot of drops. I mean, when you consider that you sit down, I mean, I use a lot of white, like I said, and pure white is my color that I go through a ton. I go through blue liner a lot too. Here I'm using probably maybe 8 drops total. But I mean, at that rate, it's still going to take me like a lot of time to run through like 50 days of using that much blue liner. And I don't use blue liner on every model. So cool, Lee. I asked David for it for my birthday. My birthday's in June. I'll have to remind him. Last I checked, Audrey doesn't like necessarily count drops, Pendrake, but you could certainly figure it out. They may have done tests since I've gone as well. All right, so let's take this middle since I've got my darker colors mixed up because I'm going to need to tune this. So I want to, if I do a misstep, I want to be able to knock it back. And like I said, right now I'm looking at kind of how much of the hair is black. So let's actually kind of break it down. I've got these 2 bands of color, right? I've got one band that kind of goes through here, and I've got this other band that goes up through here. And they're about the same width as this band of black here. The band of black here is a little bit thinner, and then there's a band of black down here that's just interrupted in a couple of places. I've also got some black kind of going into it to break up the strands. So really what I'm looking at now is like probably 40% of the hair is highlights and 60% of the hair is black. And that explains why the hair doesn't look black to me right now. Because it, you can see it, I'm getting a little glare from the camera that's making the hair look lighter. So let's get that back in. That's about perfect. That's how the hair actually looks in person. So if you want a color to be really like strongly telegraphed on a figure, you usually want about 75% of the surface to be that color. So even with my bits of black coming in here and there, I probably am getting close, but I could probably interrupt these highlights a little bit more. Yeah, I know, Pendrake. Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going to be priming, like, or if you're doing your liner through an airbrush, I bet you only go through like a bottle and a half crows, if that, depending on how much you thin it. It's very little paint on the brush, thinner paint, and a very good brush in our, for the fine strands. These aren't even, like, a lot of this is actually just suggested by the sculpt. But anyway, the hair looks okay, but it is in danger of looking blue-black and not black. So if you want it to be really black, you've got to bring in more black. And this is the mistake people constantly make with black. You have to keep a lot of your area actually black. Now with here, if we like where our highlights are, we can sneak in more black by doing what I just did, introducing more black in between strands up on the head. So I could like tone down this little strand here, and I could bring a little bit more black in here, and it probably doesn't take a whole lot to bring this down just a little bit. I think this one goes up a little bit too much. Because I have, like, there's definitely a wave in the hair here where it's kind of concave. And so the light isn't going to hit there. It's going to hit up here around the crown of the head. It's going to hit here where the hair is coming out into the light again. So I need to pay attention to that and pay attention to where the light would actually hit the hair. Oh, you should probably get an airbrush for that pirate ship, Crow. It's just something simple. Like, it's going to take you forever to brush paint it. Like, and I say that even as an Anne who, like, never uses an airbrush, but on a model that big, I think I would cave. I might beg David to airbrush it. All right, let's kind of tune this just a little bit. I don't think I need very much. Like, but I just want a little bit. I want to knock it back just a little bit more. Bring my black in just a little bit more. Pay special attention to where it's like the underside of a clump of hair where there wouldn't necessarily be as strong highlights. So kind of wipe those out just a little bit. I can always bring them up again on the layer below. Like, bring it up a little bit closer to that. This is also a good time where, as Inara was just saying, she has trouble getting thin strands. If you do, then use your black and thin them that way. So sometimes you can't draw a thin strand, but you could do a little bit of black right up against the previous strand and thin it that way. So essentially I just made that strand thinner by painting black over part of the strand. Part of this is brush control, but if you never try your brush control, you're never going to get better at it. So do it, jump in. Yeah, of course. You could use brown liner in an airbrush, and you want to thin it to the consistency that, you know, keep in mind it's a more fluid paint than a regular paint. So I would say if somebody tells you to thin a certain amount for regular Master Series, I'd cut that thinning amount in half for liner, personally. But yeah, I mean, you can shoot any MSP through an airbrush. You're just going to get varying coverage with the liners since they're made to be a little more transparent. Well, that's Hollywood for you. Nothing like reality. Oh, hey, I need to do brush surgery. 1 second. We'll put in a little bit of a highlight here, and then we'll come back and do some brush surgery because I've got a tiny little hair that's sticking out, and some people may be wondering how to deal with that who didn't see previous shows on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in more black in the areas where the light isn't falling, and I'm going to intensify my highlights a little bit in the areas where it is falling. So I'm not expanding the amount of area that I'm covering with the blue-gray, but I am still adding a little bit more blue-gray to counter the blue-gray I'm taking out. So let me do brush surgery, and Grims, you know, I've always found that to be a very frustrating, pardon me while I beat up my brush a little bit just to make sure I can see the hair I need to, I'm gonna have to wait till it's loaded with paint. So, okay, I've always been frustrated personally, as a person who is trying to learn to airbrush. I get so frustrated when people say that stuff. I mean, yay Adam Savage, but milk, seriously, I don't airbrush with milk. I don't paint with milk. I don't know what you mean by it. I don't drink milk. So, it's like, it's frustrating to me when people use that. It's like, what does that even mean? People were saying that early about layering, and it made me layer the wrong way for years. So, I mean, Erin Lovejoy of Miniature Monthly is like the expert probably in airbrushing with MSP and airbrushing in general. So, yeah, Inara, that's what I was wondering. So, like, and also the other thing, Grims, to keep in mind is like people like Erin Lovejoy actually like to use it much thicker, a thicker paint at higher pressure, right, guys? And so that's, yeah, I'm pretty much a non-dairy Anne, and I've always hated milk since I was a child. And I even understand paint consistencies, but to me, like, I think my white is kind of the consistency of milk right now, and that's like a 1-to-1, and I think that's maybe too much. But then I deal with a lot of people who believe very firmly in using a slightly thicker paint when they airbrush. So that said, I think that for something like the pirate ship, getting out ye old airbrush and experimenting a bit, if you want to learn to airbrush, like, like yours truly, the noob, you're never going to learn unless you use it. I am well conscious of this. Like, I'm like, if I really want to learn to use an airbrush, I'm going to have to start using an airbrush. And I just don't care enough right now. Well, yeah, you just got to keep at it, Pendrake. I mean, that's the difference between somebody who, like, learns to do something and who doesn't master how to do something, is that, you do it and you give up because you're not good at it. But in reality, everybody fails. You just got to keep trying. Yeah, right, Inara. What kind of dairy are we talking? Yes, Lovejoy. Cult of 40. Uses 40 PSI and much thicker paint. Yep. So Grimm's, there's all sorts of different ways. And a lot of people, the traditional way, I think, is to use thinner paint. But I think a lot of people like the thicker paint because of the adhesion qualities. Like, what I found is when you airbrush with really thin paint, depending on the brand and depending on how much what additives you might be using, you really impact how well the paint sticks to the model. And you have to put a lot of coats down, right? So it seems to be in fashion now to use thicker paint at 40 PSI. I think it's more that Shadow Raven, where they were painted initially, but then if there was no money, they were not repainted. Like, it cost a lot of money to get a ship. You'd have to haul it out of the water, for one thing, to paint it. So then it wasn't making money. It wasn't, doing business. And it cost a lot of money in paint. And if you did a figurehead, you actually hired a real artist to do it, which also cost money, which your ship owner might not be willing to pay at any given point. So then you just wandered around with a half-naked ship. I'm sure there were a lot of half-naked ships out there. So let's start doing some higher highlights and wait till my brush... Obviously, my brush got scared when I said it was going to get surgery. Like, that hair hasn't stuck out since then. I think it's the Badger... Is it the Badger Patriot, guys? That's actually really... really decent price, Grimm's, and a general workhorse. Like, it's if you're mostly doing like basic base coating, or highlighting, base coating, and shading big models, or doing a lot of like priming with it, like the Badger Patriot is the one that I always hear about. All right, so I'm going to put littler highlights toward the inside of each of these strands. So if the strand goes this long, I'm just going to put a little highlight in there. This is 3 layers of highlighting at this point. Yes, Patriot 105. There we go. And then Reaper Vex. Our new airbrush that we worked with Badger to develop is also a favorite, becoming a favorite because it's very, very versatile. So it depends on what you need. Aha, there's that pesky hair. I knew it was going to come out again. Can you guys see it? Here, I'll put my palette out here. We're going to zoom in and we're going to do surgery. Zoom. All right, let's see. See that hair? Yeah, really annoying hair. It's not long enough to like really, really get in the way, but it still annoys me. So take your knife, gently separate out the hair. Keep kind of teasing it out until you get down to the ferrule. Hold on, see it? Tease it out. See it bend down there? And then kind of just use your brush right against the top of the ferrule there and snick it off. And you can try a couple times. Sometimes you don't quite get it. Boop. There it is. Brush surgery complete. There's my hair. And the important thing about the reason you do brush surgery this way is that you do not actually compromise the build of the brush. So if you were to pull out that hair, you would essentially upset all the glue and all the careful, arrangement that makes your brush hairs work, that makes them hold such a nice tip and all of the rest of that, you would disrupt that. So that's why you always want to use an X-Acto knife, and you just snick the hair off right at here. You don't pull it out. You aren't really pulling it at all. You're just like cutting it off with your knife. And that way your brush will get thinner over time, as mine has done, but you will not, it'll still work. It'll still be a good. No, that actually runs a very high risk of ruining your brush if it's a good brush, 9 cents. It depends. You could get lucky, but all of these brushes have been laid in a particular way in order to keep this amazing tip. And when you pull a hair out of there, you disrupt that. And maybe a brush can handle that for a little while, or maybe the hair is brittle enough that when you pull it, it actually breaks off at the ferrule, but you're risking it. It's not a good idea. Oh, Kraken. When you don't know, you do things because you don't know. When you learn better, then you're cool. Then if you still do it, then we can yell at you. But never yell at people for not knowing things. Just, educate them. And if you educate them and they still want to ruin their brushes, well, then you can yell. Yeah, no shaming. We're a wholesome show who supports people and tries to teach them good habits. But yes, that's the way to do brush surgery. And now I can go back to happily painting without my silly brush errant hair. All right, so we're good. We're good. I think I want that disrupted a little. So a little bit more black in there. I'm going to go back to doing some smaller highlights like I was saying. So instead of in a big long area like this, I might only do a little tiny short, maybe half of that highlight. And then we may do some glazing, knock it down and bring it back up. Oh yeah, Grims. Yeah, Gundams are hardcore. The things that people do to those suckers are amazing. Uh-oh. It's the UPS truck. It's here to beep at us. I think. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what the beepy thing is. And if it doesn't go away in a few seconds, we will close the window. But seriously, UPS truck or whatever you are. All right. I'm going to... Oh. I'm going to close the window and it stops. Sorry. Morning delivery stuff here at the apartment complex. All right. So... very small highlights as you get lighter. Uh-oh, there it is again. It was taunting me. Totally taunting me. Oh yeah, it's a big moving truck. I'm totally gonna close the window. Hold on, guys. One moment. There we are. Silence. So annoying. Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have my fan either because I put it in the bedroom last night and totally forgot to bring it into my office. So I'm going to sit here and overheat with my giant ring light. Hopefully I can open up the... When I take my stretch break, in a few minutes, I'll go and get my fan. And reopen the window. So if you've got this big, long area here, you want a little highlight down the middle with a brighter color. So you're shrinking your highlights, just like with any layering. You're making brighter highlights get smaller and smaller, especially on something like hair, which is shiny. And generally, if you want to do a straight-ish line going fast, like I'm going fast, notice I'm not taking I'm kind of using a quick short stroke. That gives you a straighter line usually than trying to draw it painstakingly. And you don't have to worry so much about lining up your strokes. You just, as long as you're in the right direction that the hair grows, you're good. The thinner your paint and the less paint you have on your brush, the thinner and finer your lines will be. Yeah, I'm down again already, Pendrick. I don't want to stretch early. I get more mileage when I stretch later in the stream. Because later in the stream is when my body is more tired, so I don't want to... When I'm still relatively fresh, it seems silly to stretch. So I'm going to bring this in a little bit. I want that strand to go up just a little because it sticks out a bit. Just like this strand does over here. If you're doing strands like this that are pretty well sculpted, and if you're starting out, you can also use the side of your brush. You want to make sure that there's very little paint on your brush. But if you do that, you can hit these strands by using the side of your brush, and you don't even have to worry about. I use this a lot on straight hair with minis if I'm going fast for highlights. I'm going to try to pull this in a little bit more here. So I feel like my highlights are not emulating well enough the shape of the hair. So I want to bring this area a little bit wider. I also need to bring up a little bit of highlights down here at the end. I have some over on the side. Yeah, there we go. Because the hair is kind of swooping out right there and would get a little bit of highlight. But again, I have to kind of watch. Make sure I don't completely lose my black. But I'm not really in danger of that on the side of the head because we've got a little bit on the crown of the head and we've got this big broad section. We've got big sections of black to either side. So I can minimize that a little bit and still get about my 75% of the area black. And the other thing we can do is to glaze everything, which I'm going to do in a second. I want to bring up all my highlights first. So if you have trouble with blending, glazing is your friend, because you can block in your highlights and then put a glaze over them to knock them down, and then do another layer of highlights with your previous color because you took it down a bit with your glaze. In this case, I'd be using black. So then you can come back in and put another layer of highlights, and everything will slowly blend in as you glaze and rehighlight. And it's maybe a little slower, but it gives good results, especially on hair, I find. And if you don't like to glaze, like with a huge area glaze, you can always do kind of spot glazing, which you just take a little section at a time, which is probably what I will do. I kind of like that. That's looking better. If I decide I like it a lot without the glaze, maybe I'll forego it, but I kind of wanted to demo it, so maybe we'll do it. Just trying to break up again some of this blue. Well, layering is what I'm doing right now, mad. So I'm essentially, layering is when you're putting a wet paint on a dry surface and you're building up highlights or building down shadows. So here I am putting these little slightly brighter blue-gray highlights, see them? In the middle of this longer highlight, because I want there to be like an area where the light is really strong. Like when you've got a shiny surface, you usually have like a strong highlight that's coming down like kind of the middle where it bulges out. See how it does that on my brush? So if you're going to have a shiny area, you need to build up to near white highlights along wherever the hair would really be hitting your eyes. I feel like I'm maybe missing a real good position for that though, so maybe I have to mess around. So layering is just building up highlights along the areas where you feel like light is really hitting the model. But glazing is putting a thinned, kind of a wash, but a little even thinner than that, a thinned layer of paint over the top of everything. It makes everything blend together a lot better. And layering and glazing are two of the key foundational techniques in miniature painting. Once you know layering and glazing, you can do anything, because everything else, smooth blending, textures, skin tones, like you can get there because layering and glazing are your friends. So if you learn nothing else, learn those techniques. Other things like brush control will come over the course of just your experience with painting. You can pick up wet blending if you like the technique, but it's not necessary. But I mean, layering and glazing at that point, you know, they become your doorway. They're your gateway technique. Oh, did our Inja ask about my brushes or my palette? Which one? We talked about the palette pretty exhaustively earlier. Inexhaustively. Both. I was inexhaustive, but I did get exhausted eventually.
But yeah, the brush, today I am using my Winsor Newton series, or not my Winsor Newton, my Da Vinci Maestro Series 10 size 1. Wonder what got in my mouth there. I haven't used Winsor Newton for like 2 decades. So really bright, if I want a really bright highlight down there, and I'm just building up like higher and higher highlights, and I always leave a little bit of my previous highlight sticking out from underneath, that's what gives you the blended appearance. And if I ever paint over that, I have to put it back in, kind of in between my bright highlight and my other highlight. But that's how you create the illusion of a blend, is you are starting at one point, and then you are adding a highlight that's a little smaller, and then you're adding another highlight that's a little smaller, and you're adding another highlight that's a little smaller, and you go up to a level as befits your subject matter. So black hair tends to be really shiny, and so I'm going to go up quite high to pure white. Brushes. Yeah, I like 2 brands that I particularly like are the Raphael and the Da Vinci. Raphael can be hard to find these days. They seem to be running out of it a lot. People have realized what an awesome brush it is. But I use fairly large. I mean, both of my brushes are size 1s. It's not about the size of the brush. It's about like how good the tip is. So these are both Kolinsky sables. Kolinsky almost always says Kolinsky on the ferrule. Kolinsky. That means it's one of the 2 highest grades of red sable. Da Vinci, the brand I like is the Maestro, the Vinci Maestro, the line. And then the Raphael, the series I like is the 8408, which is the more narrow of them. If you tend to use thicker paint, go for the 8404 instead. It's much wider. But yeah. And this is a Maestro Series 10, which is it's their standard round. Most brush lines will have a standard round, and that is usually the shape you are looking for miniature painting, although you can certainly experiment with other stuff. There we go. All right. Let's glaze. Let's build a glaze and just throw it on there. So if I feel like my highlights have gotten maybe too bright, or I'm not seeing a real nice blend and I want more blending, I will take this and create a glaze. Take my color. This is 4 drops of blue liner and 1 drop of black. I'm just going to put a smudgy like brush full of it down, and I'm going to add a drop of water. Remember, this is already thinned in its own well as well. And I'm going to mix that up and see what it looks like. This is why a well palette is really nice. You can kind of see by how it looks as it falls off the side of the palette how thin it is. See how thick that still is? Like, it's still coloring that white a lot. So I need another drop. Now we're to at least 2 to 1 on this. And that's water to paint, which is the reverse of what we usually say. So actually 1 to 2. Now you can see more. Like, see how it's more transparent, right? We added another drop. So there is a point where you will break the paint. You don't want to go over 3 to 1 usually, but you'll find that Master Series holds up to this thinning very, very well. Some colors may experience a tiny amount of separation if you let them sit with this much water in them. But many colors, at least while you mix them and while you're using them, are going to stay in solution just fine. And that's the reason for that is the base that Master Series uses. And it's very different from most other bases on the market. Good. Yay. I'm glad Untamed Painter. Yeah, I find that it really helps. And then once you've got a sense, like I said, once you've got a sense of how to thin your paints and what different thinnesses look like and act like, then you can go back to the wet palette and get a lot of mileage out of it because you'll know how much to mix each brush full of paint when you're trying to do thinner applications. So this is about right. It's really colored water. If I bring it over here on the side, see, it's really colored water. Where I stretch it thin, it's just not there. That's what you want with a glaze. So I'm going to take this on my brush, on a bigger brush, because I'm going to be moving over bigger areas. And I'm actually going to, since the hair is easily divided into sections, I'm going to paint it in sections. So I'm going to go down and paint these 2 sections. And I'm just going to brush this right over the top. And this is where I'll find out if my paint really was thin enough. It'll look dark at first. If you feel like, oh my gosh, I've gone too dark, you can right away put some water on it, but I know it's pretty thin. One thing you want to do is if you see it pooling anywhere, you want to rinse out your brush, dry off your brush, and come back and kind of pull it out. You don't ever want it to pool. Because this is not a wash we've built, this is actually so thin that it's going to dry. You can see how it's drying there with that coffee stain mark. That's how it's going to dry on your model unless you pull all your excess paint off. So make sure that you do that and do not let it pool. So what it's going to do is it's going to darken everything. And then it's also going to blend in any brush strokes. So when this dries, you won't be able to see as many brush strokes. It'll be darker and you won't be able to see it. But that means you can take your previous highlight color that you darkened down with that glaze, and you can use that again to bring up your highlights on top and slowly just build up layers. Now, if you can get your nailing out the gate, obviously you don't have to like use the time to re-highlight. So glazing does add another step, but if you're not good at paint consistency, so blending is hard for you still, layering and glazing is the way to go. And with me even, I mean, I'm really good at layering, but there are times where I'm just like, I would prefer to just kind of block in things and then glaze and work up my smoothness that way. It really depends on what I'm doing. So then I pick up my highlights again. I still have my lower highlights. They're still there. They're just darker. Notice how the glaze has made everything else move closer to black. So now we're going to get closer to looking like we have actual black hair. You have a very large thumb. Got it. I have a small thumb, apparently. But at least not anymore a black thumb. It used to definitely be a black thumb. There were times when I would have looked at the plants I currently have and go, oh, you guys, you're doomed. So just little tiny dashes now of highlight. But I still have, the thing is, I still have enough highlight remaining after the glaze that it still exists, it's just darker. So it's still lighter than the black sections of the hair. But now it's starting to look, actually, it's got a lot more sheen to it. I like it. All right, so I'm going to bring in a little bit of highlight down here. I was thinking that I actually had some of my highlights a little bit mispositioned here. So I'm going to actually try to bring up this area down here a little bit. I'm going to bring some black back into it. If you thicken your glaze, you can paint with it, and then it's layering again. Layering, ideal layering consistency is actually close to glazing, but it's probably closer to wash. And ideal layering consistency also varies by the color, because the more white you have in it, the more water you need. New people who have been speaking up today, thank you for speaking up. If you are still here, there is a free video I did, a class for ReaperCon that is up on the Reaper YouTube. It is called Thinning Msp Paints. I talk about exactly how much to thin for various techniques and how to change it up when you use lighter colors, because you have to use more water at that point. I think I'm using blues in that video. And then if you go to my Patreon, there's actually a free handout for that class as well. So go to the Reaper YouTube. Maybe Quindy can give us the, yeah, Quindy's got it. Quindy's got the link. So that's the link to our YouTube for my class that I did at ReaperCon last year on thinning Msp paints if you want to learn to thin your paints more effectively. And then my Patreon is patreon.com/paintingbig. And if you look in the free public section there, you should find my handout for thinning Msp paints. And that just pretty much gives you the written account of like kind of examples of what I've done in the video. So you have it in writing as well. So you don't have to, you don't have to go back and reference. You can just print that out. You still want to watch the video though, because you can see then what I'm talking about the transparency levels and what I'm looking for to get various effects. So I think you need both really. But once you've watched the video, then you'll have the understanding to use the PDF. I'm a great believer for using both as learning tools. And you're welcome, Hagar. I'm glad you got value out of it. It really, like, this is the sort of thing, the sort of little nuts and bolts thing that I wished painters would break down back when I was learning. And so for me, the more I can break down the actual nuts and bolts of things for you guys, because sometimes it's just so simple. Like the reason that you're having trouble is just that your paint isn't quite thin enough, or you're not unloading your brush enough, or things like that. Like little mechanical things that a lot of painters who are more advanced just don't think about anymore. They just do it the way they do it. But I've always found a lot of value in deconstructing my own process to try to help other people. So That is what I do. So I do talk about stuff like that. I do talk about unloading your brush. I have a whole video on my Patreon about unloading your brush. And I think it's possibly the most useful video I have ever done for Patreon or for anything. Like, I could do a whole class just on unloading your brush. It would be monotonous. But yes, all free Mad Zapper. So go watch, have fun. If you like my style and you like my style of teaching, become a regular on the morning show or join my Patreon. I have some cheap levels. Because it keeps me going. It's actually what I do. I do this full time. So I appreciate every one of my Patreons. They're saving me from corporate America, as Derek Schubert put it one stream. So yeah, I totally appreciate all you guys. You are fantastic. You keep me going. Oh, and I need to email. That reminds me. I have to-dos to do. I have so much Patreon stuff to catch up on. I've been working on things. Oh, did I wipe myself? I did. Sometimes I just dip myself in the paint. And that's when we get splooshes on the colored paper, which is why I use colored paper, because it's just so cheap. So I can replace it when I inevitably dip my hand in paint and smear it all over the place. Pardon me while I depaint myself. Oh, I should take a stretch break. This is a good opportunity. I can reopen the window. Reopen the window, grab my fan, do my stretches real quick. Ah, yay, air. Another moving truck is going to come in. Let's just put Monique down so you guys can have something pretty to look at while I do my stretches. She'll stare at you with her red eyes. She's not quite straight on her base. There we go. Much better. There we go. All right. Stretch, please. If you guys have been sitting for as long as I have or longer, please get up and stretch. Your spine will thank you, as will your shoulders. Ugh. You guys talking restaurants? Oh, you're talking grocery stores. I was going to say. We're going out to eat this weekend because the weather's supposed to be nice. We're going up into the mountains. It's a surprise. David just told me he has a reservation. He has not told me where we're going. So, excitement. That'll be a nice treat for Saturday. All right. Stretches. More stretches. I'm going to go get my box fan, guys. So just give me a second and I'll come back and we will resume. Yay, fan! Sweet. Alrighty. We return. And we return with air movement. Yay. There we go. Much better. Yeah, Art Ninja, your dog is smart. Like, stretching is so useful. Don't stay sedentary. Sedentary is the new smoking. I firmly believe it. My back was just a wreck. Ask anybody who was watching me earlier this year after my back went out for probably the third time in my existence. And it was so bad that I started doing yoga in the mornings and strengthening exercises. And now I'm great. But I do get up and stretch. And encourage everybody to do so. Do a couple of PT stretches and a couple of yoga stretches. So let's hit this with a little bit of smaller highlighting. When you're doing a curved surface like this, your highlight is kind of in the middle when you're doing hair specifically. Because hair kind of highlights like that. It's translucent, so light passes through it from, from one end of this little curve to the other. So your highlights end up in the middle. Oh yeah, Untamed Painter. That's what I wanted to avoid, so that's what gets me. I get out of bed early now to do my yoga in the morning. And it has saved me so far. So fingers crossed. I feel for you though. My dad had back surgery. My friends have had back surgery. I went through a lot of surgery for something completely different a few years ago, and I just don't want any more surgery if I can keep away from it. So, okay, so going up to pure white here, or close to it, to make it look shiny. And I'll probably knock this down with a glaze. I am going to extend my highlights just a little, though. I feel like I missed out on my top level highlights. There we go. And now I want to knock those back. But yeah, good luck on your surgery. Big time, Untamed Painter. It's scary. Surgery is scary. It always freaked me out. It would just be like my brain shut down for a week leading up to it because it was just like in wait and see mode. All right, so let's get a glaze over this because you can all see the brush strokes. And the glaze isn't going to fix it perfectly, but it's going to make it a little better. And I did go up to white and leave brush strokes kind of on purpose because there was our glaze. And again, I'm kind of spot glazing. I'm just taking this one area and glazing it. Kind of spreading the paint out into the black area because it doesn't hurt it. And it lets me if I see a pool, I can just pull it out into the surrounding hair. I don't have to actually wick it off. Although I do want to rinse out my brush, dry it off real quick, and go back and make sure that I'm not missing any puddles or pools by just kind of touching my brush in between the cracks. I don't want coffee stains drying up on my raised areas. Yeah, surgery, I had many. The first time you do it, it's scary. After that, you know what to expect, but then it's still kind of nerve-wracking because surgery. And it's just, I don't know, I always found it kind of a relief to get past it. Get like through those couple of days right after it. All right, so we glazed. I actually thinned my glaze a little bit more than it was before, so it didn't impact this as hard as the previous glaze did the area down below. But it did take things down a little bit. It's not as white as it was. Now, I do think I want to bring in my highlight and blend in those white areas a little bit more. You won't really see a spot highlight, like dot, 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 except on extremely wet surfaces or extremely glossy surfaces. So if you're like doing monster mouth, like the inside of a monster mouth, like the gums, doing a spot of white highlight on the top of each pink gum where it comes close to a tooth is actually a good strategy because it implies that it's wet. Because you don't see that dot of white as a highlight unless a surface is very shiny or wet. There, that's smoother. So essentially I glazed and then I brought in my previous highlight to kind of work up my my white so it blends in a little bit more. It looks a little bit more slick and snazzy. I do think I want to go, yeah, I'm pretty good up there. Good on the top of the head. Want to start working around the other side. I mean, eyes are eyes are eyes, in my opinion. If you want to do chibi eyes, yeah. Although you could just go and watch how I did these. If you like these eyes. But if you want to do actual anime eyes with more the like triangle highlight and all that kind of thing, yeah, you should go look for tutorials. I think there's probably PDF tutorials out there. But I mean, these eyes are like just more cartoony versions of the eyes that I do on busts and stuff. So I do eyes pretty much the same, depending. It's just like, do I leave them a little bit more artificial looking or don't I? On this model, they're a bit artificial looking. I didn't do some of the realism steps that I normally would do to get a very realistic looking eye. So bringing up the highlights on there. Because, I mean, her eyes are, I think, even bigger than my bust here. Yeah, they are. Significantly bigger. But I kept them very cartoony and not realistic. Because chibi. You want them cartoony. It's the genre. Yeah, you still get a little bit. HM Road Dog. We got about 20, 25 minutes left. We're doing hair. We're doing a lot of black hair. So it's little touches and glazing, and I was talking about highlights and all that stuff. Now it's just like rinse and repeat, trying to tune the hair and make it look the way I want it. I do want a little bit here. You do want a little bit around the face. And back to here. Yeah, I mean, that's my patented. I'm glad you like it. That's my Anne's vampire mix that David totally stole from me to do some 28mm vampires recently. Because he likes it too. I don't think you can look at this, especially if it's paired with red. It just looks so darn good. That's why I keep using it. I have no urge to ever do anything else for my vampire skin. I really want to do it on a bust, because that would be even more fun. Then I could really bring up some of the rosy tones in it. Just putting little touches of highlight now in the middle of my previous highlights. Little bits. There we go. That's looking nice. I like how that looks. I need a little bit more over here. Kind of missed an area right there. There. I painted the 54mm Monique. Mine is the one in the gallery, Dogfather, unless they lost the image. I'm painting this with the exact same color scheme that I used on the 54mm Monique, except doing the brown apple pink for the black highlights. If you go to the Patreon, there should be public posts that you can access. If you scroll down the posts, Lee, you should be able to find the thinning Msp Paints one. You should also see some other stuff like the color wheel, the random color wheel generator, and things like that. There are a couple of videos, although they're older, in my old setup, so I think the videography now is a little bit better. I have improved over the years. Well, hello, raiding. CG Mini Painting, thank you for the raid. We are doing black hair today, as you can see, on my little chibi vampire, Monique. Well, no, you just didn't look. You wondered idly and you didn't check. I totally get it. I do it too. Hello, everybody. Good to see you, Chinner. But yeah, we're tuning the hair with some layering highlights and some glazing where we need it to make it integrate a little bit more. I'm really happy with how the back is looking now, though, so don't think we need glazing there. I need to work a bit more on this side. I think we'll come in right about, we'll have finished the hair by the end of this stream, which is what I wanted to do. I'm going to put some of my darker highlights down below, guys. So even though there's no light falling down here, the hair is shiny and there would be reflected light. So obviously there's some light falling on her, like moonlight or something from up above. Or she's under like artificial light, although probably not torchlight because that would be yellow. And I didn't paint it that way. So either there she's got sunblock and she's out on the beach. I don't know. But at any rate, you'd get some reflected light. And when you have shiny objects, you do get kind of a little bit of a highlight on the underside of things. It just stays very dark. Did you find it, Lee? But yeah, you should be able to scroll down public posts and see it. There. A little bit of highlight there. Just to bring that out. Good deal. Alright. Yes, I like this side for the most part. I think I could use just a little bit more highlight coming out from the top of the head. So I'm going to add that up there. So I want to make these a little broader, because the hair comes out to the side of her head here. So on this side, guys, see how sharp that fold is? Like how the hair kind of comes up and goes down right away because she's parted on the side. So this side, having that really sharp little highlight makes perfect sense. But this side, the hair, you can see I did do a broader highlight, but I kind of feel I need just a little bit more coming out from there with my darker blue. So I'm adding a little bit more. Because the hair kind of goes, you know, in a mound over this side of her head. It's a lot more of a subtle peak. It is Thursday. I am streaming on my own channel later today. It is twitch.tv/paintingbig. I have been lately working on a couple of personal projects slash competition projects. And I may be doing that today. Kind of in a painting groove lately, so. We were playing D&D for a while, but I'm like, when I feel like painting, then I definitely want to get some projects done. I want to have several things done for ReaperCon. Oh, okay. Oh, that's cool, Lee. Don't worry about it. Yeah, just go find it when you have time. No hurry. So yeah, I'll be streaming later about 4 p.m. USA Central Time. I do a couple of hours once a week, so that I can paint stuff at different scales and subject matters that isn't Reaper usually bigger stuff. Big Apple, 10 months. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, this is almost good, guys. This is almost good. I really like this. Remember, you can see how the glaze kind of narrowed this band of highlights. Like, if I bring my palette back in, it tends to darken it down. So we have a lot more dark space in here than we did. And so the hair, as a consequence, the hair looks more black. It looks more like it is black. The other thing that this little highlight down here does is to kind of bring out and make you notice this underside area, which before just was black. You kind of maybe didn't look at it. But it also means that it brings in this big underside of black as well, so it adds more black to the overall composition. So this right now to me looks like shiny black hair, which is happy. That's what I wanted. So we're just working on this side. I definitely need to hit this with a glaze. See how bright it is? It's really streaky. So I'm going to grab my glaze, which is really thin paint. It's probably close to 1 to 2.5 paint to water. A lot of water. And I'm going to paint it in a thin layer over the areas that I want to bring down a bit. And then I'm going to rinse out and dry out my brush. And come back and kind of brush over any areas where I see the paint pooling, kind of spread it out into surrounding areas, or just wick it right off the model. Here, because the surrounding areas are black, I'm just pretty much spreading it out. but you don't want it to pool like a wash. That's not the point. The point of a glaze is the opposite of a wash. A wash you want to pool. You want it to settle in the cracks and stay there. A glaze is too thin for that. It's going to dry in weird coffee stain patterns if you let it pool. So you don't ever want it to pool. It will not stay and play nice. So that takes us down. You see how those blended in a bit more now? Like, that's the magic of glazes. And the reason you want them to be so thin is so that you can build up more than one layer if you want to, but you never want to start too thick, because if you start too thick, you're going to wipe out your work and have to redo it. So you can't go back. Like, you can always add another layer if you want it to be darker, but you can never go back. You have to repaint the area if you put it on too dark. So that's why glazes, I always go thinner. Thinner for the win. If you are in doubt, go thinner. I do have a little bit of a blurf there, so I want to touch that up. Separate out those strands. That's looking really good now. She looks really shiny. You want her to look shiny. And actually, there's an area under here that probably would get some highlights, so some small reflected highlights. See the hair down there? See how before you paint it, it's just black. You just don't notice it, right? You look at the rest of the hair and you just don't notice that big under dark area. But I'm going to use my dark blue-gray, this color. This would be my highest highlight on the underside of things. But yeah, when you're dealing with shiny things especially, there will be some highlights on the underside of things. And even if you're not dealing with really shiny things, like if you go and look outside, you walk around your local streets, and you look at people in their t-shirts or whatever they're wearing, you'll see that you can see that there's details in the shadows. It's just that the highlights are much darker because it's in shadow. So I did kind of a video about this. I'm going to be putting it up on the Patreon, $2 video. I had to reshoot it because I didn't think I did it very well the first time around, but hopefully it'll talk about stuff like that. All right, so just a little bit of suggestion there, and suddenly it's not just black, right? But we keep it mostly black, and it'll help to add to the illusion that the hair is definitely black. I do want to probably extend some strands a little bit more and make some strands a little shorter. There we go. But that's enough there to bring up the suggestion that I'm looking for. I may want to tune it just a little bit. Some of these look a little clunky. So I'll bring some black in and thin them down a little bit. Make them a little more irregular. There we go. James. It's just lots of experience, James. You can get there. Yeah, she's cute. She's cute. She's the first ever chibi that I've painted on stream, and she will be the first chibi that I have painted to completion once she is done. It's not typically a genre I'm drawn to, but they are cute. It's just the detail is so tight and so close in the bodies that I like stuff that's big, so the tiny body. I love the big heads, but the tiny body goes against what I usually like. But yeah, she is cute, and I really like how she's turning out. I think she's one of the better Reaper chibis. The other one I really like is our werewolf named Lon. He's cool. Because he's Julie sculpt, and Julie does great animals. Alright. Yeah, I think we're looking good here, guys. I think that looks like shiny black hair. Sweet! Awesomeness. Well, let's see. What else do I want to... Is there anything else I want to do? Oh, yeah, there's kind of stuff on the inside. The inside of the shield is black, so let's do a little bit of detailing in there. There isn't really room for, like, wood grain or anything, but I can suggest a little bit. So I'm just going to paint over a little bit and then grab some of my blue. And kind of suggest that there's, like, a panel back there. Kind of do an outline, maybe a little bit of highlighting. Just bring a little bit of color into that area. You don't have to do anything too fancy. It's just the inside of a shield, but you usually want a little bit of something. If I had room, I would do like kind of a wood grain suggestion texture, but there isn't much room on this. It's all compressed. So instead, I'm going to just try to pull off just a little simple highlighting. Yeah, Father. I mean, it's we talked about all this. I had it kind of set up in a previous stream, and I don't remember which one, but obviously, I think it may have been the one before this. So if you search for that item number 77716 or Monique, you should find the last episode. In this episode should be, I think, the end of the last episode. I set up the black hair, the masses that I wanted, and then this we did all the fine tuning. I mean, hair is hair is hair, and it's just like, you highlight it all the same kind of way. I don't know, I kind of disagree. The Rockies are great, but I really like the werewolf. Like, I wanted to paint him more than anything. So I guess it's personal taste. Rocky is certainly adorable. And I mean, everybody likes baby dragons, so I could totally see how he would be the best chibi, but I have certain favorites in the Bonsylvanians. I'm blocking in some of this now. Just want to get that little bit of highlight up there. Just want a little bit of an outline. Just want to pick up a little bit of detail there. Don't want to leave it just blank. And if I want it to make it look like it's like glossed or something, or has like maybe an oiled leather or wood, and put a little bit of highlight in there that brings it up higher. Of course, we'll do the gold around it next time. That's pretty much the only thing we've got left is our gold and the basing. Can't really see the back of the shield at all, which is why I just painted it dark. Just want a little bit of suggestion there. Yeah, you can do it, Zen. I just recommended that for somebody. The thing that you tend to run into, though, if you use red highlights for black hair, is that inevitably it will start to look somewhat brown. Which is, you know, the way that black hair tends to sun bleach, right? So it's not like that's a big deal. Just be aware of that, is that it may stop looking black. You may need to use some pretty heavy glaze technique to drag it back if it goes too far. I've tried pretty much everything. I do prefer the blue just because I tend to be doing black hair on people like with colors where the blue would be a good contrasting color. But yeah. You can use red. You can use any color, really. You just have to keep your highlights and shadows the appropriate proportions. I mean, I almost did green-black hair on Lizette, but I realized that I didn't think it would go over well. Like, it wouldn't work well with the composition, so. The other problem with the red highlights for black hair is that you inevitably then have to bring them up pink, which can look a little odd. But obviously if you're dealing with a character with dyed hair, that's not a deal breaker at all. Alrighty, I think we are looking pretty good. I guess I could do some lining and get these, the belts and make sure I've got all my lining on the gold. Probably need to base coat the sword. I'm just going to actually use my blue to base coat the sword, and we'll just work it up with grays. But that way I can, this is a blue-gray anyway. So using up our last moments. But yeah, you could use, just like you can use any color to shade white hair, you can use any color to highlight black hair. It's just going to present to you different challenges in the way, in highlighting it and what it's going to look like. And if you're trying to emulate a particular light source, then you need to think about that light source when you're highlighting your hair. You can't just depart from the color of your light source to highlight your hair. So if you have like a blue sky light and you're painting red hair, you need to remember that. Or trying to highlight with red hair, with red on black hair. And maybe it's going to shift it a little. That's only if you're doing that over the whole model, of course. Which most people, honestly, when they're learning, they don't even think about it. Like the color of light is just white. Or if they're doing like a torch or a lantern, then they might have a little bit of colored light. But a lot of people are very bad at imagining how that light's going to change the area under it. Like, that's kind of the last thing I think you learn when you're learning OSL. There, I'm just going to make the hilts black there. Oh, missed a spot. Boop. Boop. There. Alright, just kind of looking around, trying to figure out what I've missed, what I might want to block in. Okay, I want to block in this belt here a little bit. And the other side. That's pretty good. I want to put a little bit of a highlight down here, I think. On the hilt. So once again, since that's black, I can use my blue-gray. Again, we're repeating colors around the model. Just don't reach for an accent color, just reach for an accent color. You want a plan for how to use that accent color and where to put it around the model. Just doing a little suggestion of the hilt there. Ah, there we go. She is coming right along. She is close to done. Any other questions while we have like a few minutes left? Everybody's busy. They're all working. You're all working. You're on teleconference meetings and everything, and you're surreptitiously watching my show. And we do appreciate it, because viewer numbers. Bye, Art Ninja. We'll see you. We'll see you next time we see you. All right. Well, let's call it just like a few minutes. Yeah. Well, everybody's multitasking. Yep. I get it. I totally get it. It's all cool. So tomorrow. So actually, let's recap. Today, we tackled the black areas that were not yet painted. So mostly we talked about painting black hair. We talked about brushes. We talked about well palettes and the usefulness of them. We talked about layering and glazes. We talked a tiny bit about accent colors. Repeat them around the figure. That's what I'm doing here with this gray blue. As I'm repeating it, like on the back of the shield, I'm repeating it on the handle. I'm repeating it on the hair. Tomorrow it's Wyvern Day. Wyvern Day. We'll be painting whatever on the Wyvern I feel like. I seem to be bouncing back and forth on the Wyvern a lot. Yeah, Moons. That's kind of our tactics here, Moonglooms. We try to make it lunchtime so that people can watch. If you're going to do a middle of the day show, at least you can tactically position it, right? So I probably could have painted her base in this same blue-gray. I might, actually, after we're done here. But that's what we're doing. So tomorrow is Wing Day, or Wyvern Day, at any rate. this kind of like blocked in, see if I like it.
Oh, good.
Fantastic, Lee. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Yes, her skin tone is fun. And of course, we did do it on camera, so you can go and watch us do the skin tone, which is, as I said, my long-time vampire skin recipe that I've used for probably 20 years, because I was using it when I won a Golden Demon with it, and that was 2002. And I started that model, I think, in 2001. So yes, I've been using it for a very, very long time. And it is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. So feel free to steal it and like tell people, and us the best vampire skin tone, go get a recipe. Watch that pro tips episode. So yeah, that gray is going to work pretty well because we're repeating colors, right? Although you'll notice that when I put it on the base, it's going to look more blue than it does up top. And that's because the bigger an area you cover with a color, the more, if there is a hue, like an actual color in that color, even if it's a neutral like this, it'll look more that. So the blue will be more intense if I put it over a bigger area than it is on a small area. But yeah, Reaper, who are we going to raid today? I'm just putzing around with the base. Getting my last couple minutes in. And I'll see you guys maybe on my stream later this afternoon. Alright, Zambies! Yay, Zambies! Alright, cool. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We really appreciate your viewing, even when you're multitasking. I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll see you guys either later today or tomorrow morning for Wyvern Friday tomorrow. Woo! Alright, have a great one, everybody. We'll see you later.